open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Local Issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
All right, welcome to Kentucky's Voice, the Friday edition, the rainy Friday edition here in Louisville and probably around the state. And we need the rain, so that's good. So we'll take it. But Mr. Producer, I got a lot of echo in the ear again. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay, so we love the rain. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to have a little moisture in the ground. But so I hope you're having a great week, and we're heading into the July 4th week next week, which is an exciting moment for the country and for the state. You know, we touched on yesterday a little bit of the history of Kentucky and how it was founded. It was basically founded, settled during the Revolutionary War, and there was a lot of history tied to that, and we might get to that later in the show and pick up some more of those themes later. But first, I wanted to bring on a guest. The program's called Kentucky's Voice, right? So we're dealing with Kentucky-oriented issues, politics, policy, and there are groups in this state that are policy groups, that are think tanks, that zero in on issues related to our state, and so we've done a pretty good job of connecting with most of them. There's one that we've had several connections with, but we have there's some new leadership there, and so we're anxious to bring them on. It's called the Bluegrass Institute. I want to bring on the CEO of the Bluegrass Institute, Caleb Brown. Which, Caleb, you and I worked together like 20 years ago at iHeart.
That's right.
And so it's kind of cool to see you back in the state. I think you went to Cato, I think, for a while in D.C. and came back. So it's glad to see you back home. And so you're now running the Bluegrass Institute. But for people that don't know what these sort of things are, because obviously, Kentucky's a state. It has a political system. There's a legislature. There's governor. There's laws that are passed, policies that are put forth. Legislatures and government needs some outside support to give them guidance on major issues. And so the Bluegrass Institute is that type of group, and it helps policymakers figure out, what would be good policy, and you advocate, just explain to the viewers and we only have 2 minutes in this segment, so make it. What is the Bluegrass Institute? What is the purpose of a group like this?
The Bluegrass Institute advocates for individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We do that through our policy pillars: economic competitiveness, criminal justice reform, and educational freedom. So those are broadly the issues that we focus on at mostly the state capitol. And I'll say that, to your point about lawmakers are, what I've discovered in my first legislative session here as CEO, they're trying their best. And I would love it if they spent an outsized amount of time on my issues, but they've got 100 other things that they have to do and various interest groups to balance. And our job is to make sure that liberty has a place at the table in Frankfort.
Absolutely. It's so important. And, as conservatives, as Republicans, and most people that are watching are generally conservative and Republican here, having a liberty-focused approach to things has always been a key theme of who we are and what we're doing. So it's really great to have a group like yours out there pushing that issue specifically. And because freedom and free markets work. It just works. And that's what's made America great in many ways. So we got about a minute left. We're going to come back and unpack a few key policies. But what do you think the Bluegrass Institute has done over the past 10 years that's most proud of? What maybe it's one issue that you help move forward that's really really made a big difference.
Well, I don't. I should say, because I'm appearing on Kentucky's Voice, that Jim Waters presided over the Bluegrass Institute for many years and presided over a great many successes that the Bluegrass Institute had. I think perhaps chief among those was our income tax regime that we have today. That this was an area where the Bluegrass Institute advocated, and we're at our best when we're pointing to other states that have done a good job. And I think we're on the path to zero income tax in Kentucky.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, let's talk more about that because that's exciting. Yeah, because we could be like Tennessee, zero income tax, just a sales tax. That'd be amazing. We'll be right back.
Radio online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. We have a great guest today, Caleb Brown with the Bluegrass Institute. And no, it's not about bluegrass music. It is about the state of Kentucky, and they are helping the state move forward in a positive direction, and there are any issues related to liberty and freedom, and so. Which is a very important thing. Kentucky has always been known as sort of an independent state. We're founded by these rugged individualist pioneers that came through the Cumberland Gap, and we value our freedom. We value our liberty here, and so you have to have a group like the Bluegrass Institute advocating for those sort of things in all walks of life. So we were touching on taxes. How Kentucky may be moving forward towards a no income tax model, very similar to what say Tennessee does. And if you've been to Tennessee, or if you know anything about Tennessee, you have no income tax. They have a pretty decent sales tax. I mean, what is it, like 6% or something, or 8%? It's not. I can't remember. Well, anyway, it's a decent sales tax, but it's not. But it offsets that by having no income tax. So, we're not there yet, but it sounds like your group is advocating that. So, how far along are we on that path, and what would it take to get there? And describe what it would look like.
Well, so we have adopted tax reform somewhat in the model of North Carolina. That is, Kentucky has adopted an income tax system that will phase out the income tax over years as long as the General Assembly, or I should say the government of Kentucky, hits certain revenue targets.
Got it.
And that allows the General Assembly to lower the state income tax. We are currently on a path to zero personal income tax in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. A lot of those changes have dramatically improved Kentucky's business tax climate relative to other states. And as long as revenues are strong, we'll continue to see personal income tax cuts until we eventually hit zero.
So how would revenue continue if income tax is reduced?
Well, there are a lot of taxes in Kentucky, as you might imagine. The state collects a bit of property tax revenue. We have sales taxes. Well, we have a state and some local option sales taxes. And for the most, and of course, we still have a corporate income tax in Kentucky, among other smaller taxes that raise money for Kentucky, gas taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So the government's getting its funding, but to make the personal income tax a shrinking share of what the government collects is the sort of the key target of this tax reform, which has dramatically improved the state economy. I think it will, if we continue along this path, should continue to create new jobs in the state, create new economic activity, new entrepreneurship. We did a report a few months ago, the Bluegrass Institute, and our findings on income taxes are pretty strong, that we should see, by virtue of this tax reform continuing, we should see thousands of new jobs created and billions of dollars in new economic activity.
Yeah, exactly. We definitely need to become a more business-friendly state, and without giving away the farm either. You know, you have examples of the Ford plant in E-Town that the state basically gave away the farm, and then they didn't end up not really building the plant or finishing out the project, and it really hurt the state. So there's other ways. Let's just create an environment where you don't have to give these special tax credits and all this. Let's just make a healthy business environment without doing that, and people will just come on their own merit without having to bribe them to come here.
State governments can't subsidize their way to wealth.
That's right.
On behalf of average people.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I was reading somewhere, and maybe this is true, and maybe you've read this, I'm sure, but if you look at all the taxes the average American pays, I mean, everything from sales tax to state income tax to federal taxes to Social Security, everything that they pay throughout their lifetime, and look at their income, it's approaching maybe 50% or more of their income is actually tax going into the government in some way. I mean, VAT taxes and just all these layers of taxes on the things you buy. And so, and that, just think about that. Half of what you make is going to pay a tax. I was reading that, that same article said, if you look at the Middle Ages, when people were serfs and you were basically a servant of a king or a landlord, the most you would pay is like 10%, to the king, or 15%. So we are paying more to our government than medieval serfs are paid to their lords and masters, And so yes, anything we can do to reduce taxes on any front is just going to help Americans. And so, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's two sides to the tax coin. The other is spending. And at least at the federal level, we have they set a terrible example in Congress with in lieu of taxation, our federal government has chosen to tax my children and my grandchildren.
Right.
And so we have a massive welfare state in the United States of America, and we've just chosen not to pay for it up front. And say what you want about countries like Denmark or other capitalist countries that also have huge welfare states. They've at least agreed to pay for those up front through, again, huge taxes. So if we're not paying attention to the spending, I think a strict focus just on tax rates is it's just half of the puzzle. We need to dramatically reduce spending within the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
But I think what you're saying is spending, and the implication is borrowing, because we're borrowing to do this spending. We're not necessarily taxing the
right. I think the best kind of tax is one that is transparent, that people are confronted with directly, and that pay for current services.
Right.
So borrowing is short circuits that process. Right. I'd rather have taxpayers angry about their high tax rates that are going to pay for current services, and make those actual trade-offs when they're in the voting booth. Right now, what we've decided is we're putting everything on the federal government, at least, putting everything on a credit card, and letting future Congresses worry about it. At the state level, it's a little more limited. We can't borrow trillions of dollars here in Kentucky to pay for current things that we like. But there are a lot of avenues where spending ought to be reduced, where taxes ought to become a little more transparent. And one of the taxes that a lot of Kentuckians face is property taxes. And it's been a huge complaint post-COVID. We saw assessments in a lot of outlying areas skyrocket. 100%. And we see local governments, particularly school boards, approving tax hikes without any input from the public whatsoever. My friend, who's I think appeared on this program, Levi Anderson, is a tax advocate in Shelby County. He and I wrote a piece for the Courier-Journal a while back, basically making the argument that when your local government raises your taxes, it should be very clear when they do it. They should let you know well in advance when they're going to take the vote, and that we should in a sense, cap the amount of revenue that local governments take out of the voluntary sector of the economy.
At the very least, cap the rate of increase of the property tax. Because if
we do that, we do limit the rate of increase. So your local school board, I believe, can raise property taxes, or their cut of property taxes, by up to 4% every year without talking to you at all. And what that effectively means is that if your assessments have gone up and your local school board has raised their cut of property taxes by 4%, what that means is that your property taxes go way up. Now, your property taxes might go way up even when your local government is lowering the rate. If your home value increases at a much higher rate than the government is cutting taxes.
That's right.
It's a lot of math here.
No, that's right. Well, I think people have seen it.
You're actually going to pay a lot more in taxes. And for older people, especially retirees and a lot of working families, that money has to come from somewhere. And it comes out of current consumption or it comes out of savings.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody who owns property over this past 5 years or so, you've seen it. You've seen the effect of this. Basically, we've had this huge wave of inflation started, post-COVID with all the borrowing and spending. But I can blame both administrations for this. I mean, Trump. Yeah,
the spike in borrowing started in 2020.
That's right, exactly right. And a lot of that came from let's pass money out while people are sitting at home doing nothing, and then the Biden administration came in and just spent and spent and spent, and so we had these huge waves of inflation. So that means basically the dollar has devalued. It's not that everything is worth more. It's just the dollar's devalued. And so, but your home value, if you had a home that was worth $100,000 in 2020, it's probably worth about $150,000 now. And so every municipality that gets property taxes are scratching their head going, well, we're getting the same amount of dollars, but the value of that has dropped, so we have to increase the tax. So you have to increase the taxes or assessments, and so you can see why they would do it. But it's just been a real shock to everyone to get these new assessments and higher taxes. So anyway, great topic. But we got about a minute and a half left. I want to go back to what you were saying about borrowing. Can Kentucky borrow? Because it can raise taxes, obviously, but is there a limit on how much it can borrow money?
Well, I mean, was it James Carville said, if I could be reincarnated, I would come back as the bond market because it's all powerful.
There we go.
We borrow money on a schedule, essentially.
Okay.
The state issues bonds, and we repay those bonds. So, but for states that have to have mostly balanced budgets, our borrowing is dramatically more limited, and our efficiency and effectiveness at paying back other bonds matters a great deal.
Does Kentucky have a balanced budget amendment, or we have to have a balanced budget?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly. I just know that the ease with which the states versus the feds can borrow money is substantially different.
Okay, I'm gonna Google that. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT here in a second between the break, and I'm curious. I mean, it'd be a good thing to know. Okay, we got 30 seconds left. We're gonna hold you over for a couple more segments here. We want to get into affordability. You have an initiative to help bring make homes more affordable, especially for young people, because that's a real crisis, and it's really driving a lot of young people to the left because they think capitalism has failed them, the free market's failed them because they can't afford a home. So we'll talk about that in this next segment. We're here with Caleb Brown with the Bluegrass Institute on Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. We're talking about how to keep the tax man away in Kentucky, and we're talking with one of the best groups in the state that understands that issue. And maybe one day we can get just our income taxes reduced in Kentucky. Does not have to pay income taxes, and just rely on sales tax, and that'd be a wonderful thing. We did find out in the break that Kentucky does have a constitutional balanced budget requirement, and so that is something our state has. So that's a good thing. It's been there for a while, but yeah. So it's quite an interesting thing. So any comments on that, Caleb?
Well, this is I'm not a Kentucky constitutional scholar, but it makes perfect sense that the state constitution at least limits in some ways the degree to which our state can borrow without consequence.
That's right. I want to also encourage our listeners and viewers. Love to hear your text. If you have any questions for Caleb relating to taxes or just any of the topics we're going to cover today, just text 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970, and we will read them on the air. So, Caleb, we were talking about before the break the affordability crisis with homes and just things in general. Young people, the rate of home ownership. Or the age of first-time home buyers has increased dramatically, almost like a decade in the past few years. It's like now in the late 30s is the average age of a first-time home buyer now. Where when I was first bought my home, I was around 26 or so, 27. That was about the average age for a first-time home buyer, about 20-some years ago, and so that is a real problem. And so young people, I've seen interviews. Before of just, hey, what do you think about socialism? What do you think about capitalism? And usually young people will say, well, whatever, if this is capitalism, I kind of don't like it. I don't know much about socialism, but if this is what capitalism is, I can't get a job. I mean, I can work as a barista and maybe in 20 years get a house, and so they're really discouraged with the way the system is now. And Caleb, I think you and I would agree. I don't think what we have now is really a free market system. I think we have kind of a crony capitalism system that really doesn't benefit the average person as much as it should. But anyway, we'll just talk about it, just affordability in general, just some of the dynamics that are going on with that, and what can we do in the state to try to change that?
Well, so affordability is a broad problem. Part of that is driven by the inflation that we have seen recently. Mm-hmm. Part of that is regulation that has also increased costs. In the specific area of housing, this is where states can really do a lot. The feds can't really do very much. The state has delegated to local governments enormous power to control land use. And that is through permitting, it is through zoning, it is through other regulations of where homes can go, that sort of thing. But the state really has the ability to dramatically reduce a bunch of regulation that has harmed the ability of young people to afford homes and make homes affordable. And so one of the big reforms that we've advanced is what's called either the shot clock or third party review. They overlap a little bit, so I'll describe both of them. One is the shot clock the shot clock encourages or incentivizes local governments to approve housing permits in a timely fashion. When developers who are often submitting a dozen or more housing permits at a time, they often find themselves staring at a black hole where their permits went. And this adds uncertainty.
Right.
And to the extent that you've got crews waiting to work to complete homes,
right.
It often increases costs of those homes. So the idea of a shot clock is that either you deal with a permit in a timely fashion or it is deemed approved.
Oh, good. Well, that's great.
On other permitting where housing, where the structural issues related to housing, where there's a genuine health or safety issue, you enable third-party review, which is instead of taking your request to a government so they can review your plans, you take it to a licensed engineer, a licensed architect, or other professional that knows the state building code, and can tell you whether or not your plans comply You pay them, they assume a small of liability in case they're wrong or lying to you, and then they rubber stamp it, you move ahead. And at that point, there's no government involvement whatsoever. So that's a couple of key reforms there that we'd like to see. On issues related to zoning, we would like to see the state adopt what's called the Golden Girls rule that allows unrelated people to live together without a government restriction. We would like to end prohibitions that a lot of local governments have on smaller residential lots. That is to say, not setting or reducing the minimum lot size that a local government can impose upon you. And we'd like to legalize residential housing in all commercial zones. One of the things that that makes to me a wonderful, small, vibrant downtown is the idea that you can live right there. In some cases, above stores in your small downtown. And the test I give is there a shop in your downtown that sells milk and eggs? And what that tells me is, do people live here?
Right.
And so there are a lot of small reforms that the state can adopt and essentially just tell property owners, you're getting a little bit of your freedom back with respect to how you use your property. It will goose a lot of the construction. It will give developers a lot more certainty in what the work that they do. And it will dramatically reduce housing costs, as we've seen in so many other states. If you go to bluegrassinstitute.org, you can look at our menu of options for housing reforms. And right next to every reform, we list a state that has already done it. And if we care about things like home affordability, if we care about preventing things like brain drain of young people looking for greener pastures in other states, if we care about preserving farmland, if we care about walkable neighborhoods, if we care about young people getting married sooner and having more kids, one solution is the same across the board for all those problems, and that is dramatically liberalize the ability to use their own property the way they see fit to create housing.
That's beautiful. That's great thoughts, and so many questions there. What about someone who's concerned about overdevelopment? You know, like there's that area where I live in Fern Creek on Bardstown Road that's developers have come in and put all these apartment buildings up and down the stretch between 264 and Mount Washington, which is kind of a bottleneck on either end because of and so it's really makes the traffic congestion terrible. So, I mean, obviously there's been bad planning, regardless of the zoning, just bad planning. But what would you say about that? I mean, somebody said, well, yeah, sure, give developers a little more freedom, but
I'll just say
what
this.
What if they
I'll
build
say
an apartment?
Kentucky's in no danger of overdevelopment.
Yeah.
The Kentucky Housing Corporation estimates that the state is 200,000 units under where we ought to be.
Sure.
We've seen dramatic home price increases in Lexington, in Bowling Green, to a slightly lesser extent in Louisville, but Louisville is creeping up there as well. In those two markets I mentioned earlier, Bowling Green and Lexington, the median home price is at or above 5 times median household income.
Yeah. Got it.
And it wasn't that long ago that it was perfectly reasonable to find where the median home price was about 2.5 times median household income. So we've seen, relative to income, a dramatic increase in the cost of housing. And so I poo-poo a lot of people who say young people just don't want to work. I think that's stupid and just wrong, frankly. And what we ought to do is give governments incentives to accommodate the growth that is coming in a way that makes sense for that community. But trying to stop growth, I think, is no longer going to be something that our economy will be able to tolerate.
That's right. It's not sustainable. Yeah, you're right. We do have a lot of empty land in the state that we could be building on. If you look at a small neighborhood, maybe you can overdevelop that, but that can be dealt with local planning and that sort of thing. But okay, 30 seconds left. I want to you mentioned this Golden Girl rule. I follow that somewhat, but I want to understand what that is. So people can't live together in the same home. I don't understand. We'll talk more about that in the next break. But we've got Caleb Brown with the Bluegrass Institute talking liberty and economics and taxes. We do have some texts we're going to read as well. So 5710970 if you have any comments to Caleb. We'll be right back.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush, and I have a special guest with me today, Caleb Brown, from the Bluegrass Institute here in Kentucky. And it's an institute that focuses on liberty and economic issues and free market reforms and stuff that's all very much needed in Kentucky. There's still a lot of things to undo that 100 years of Democrats in this running the state have kind of messed up, and so we need to fix a lot of this stuff. We are getting a lot of your text in, so please text if you have any more questions. 571-0970, 571-0970, 502, of course, area code. Someone said something that the 4% tax is not accurate. I think he thinks that we're saying that you only pay 4% on your property taxes. There's a 4% limit to the increase each year, and at least in Jefferson County, I believe. Isn't that right, Caleb?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of different local entities are able to raise your property taxes, which is maybe its own problem, but it is a limitation on the amount of they may increase your the revenue that they collect.
Got it. And then another one says borrowing is never-ending debt. And also bank loans were at 12 and 14% under Carter, and we survived by doing without. But that's a time when a house was $25,000.
It's also at a time when a house was about sometimes 900 square feet.
That's right, exactly.
And it's become increasingly difficult to build those small starter homes that a lot of young people want, and frankly, a lot of boomers want to downsize into.
That's right.
Building those homes has become much more difficult as we've increased minimum lot sizes to the extent that it doesn't make sense for you to build a small home on a very large lot.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like the only thing that's being built anymore are either just McMansions for the boomers or townhomes. Those are the only two things I see being built, or apartments. And so you're right, there's no starter homes anymore. They're small 1,000-square-foot ranches that I grew up in. And
I'll tell you, there are a lot of young people that I know who are effective. I know the median home size has increased fairly dramatically, as median household size, that is, number of people living in a household, has declined. And so that seems like a mismatch. And I think a lot of it is driven by policy of local governments just requiring larger homes to be built. And so people end up, in many cases, living in apartments until they can get that cash together to make a down payment on a larger home that still, frankly, may not suit them.
Right. So explain that Golden Girls rule that you talked about. That basically, you said something to the effect of people are not allowed to live together in a home.
So
or something?
this is
that doesn't make any sense.
This has a funny historical connection, which is a lot of communities were trying to prevent, in many cases, houses of ill repute. From
Got it.
cropping up in their communities. Or flop houses. From popping up in their communities. I think a lot of those rules are now meant to prevent college kids from living near them. And so the idea of the Golden Girls rule is just getting rid of, and as far as I'm concerned, they're unconstitutional, these limitations on who can live in the same home together and whether it matters whether or not they're related. But the idea behind the Golden Girls rule is just that it just gives people who need housing more flexibility in how they secure it.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. So I guess I didn't realize there's laws that says that everybody in the house has to be related in order to live in this house. Is that
I think these are local, a lot of local governments have rules like that.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. That's a fascinating history. I didn't realize. Okay. And with all these McMansions that the boomers built over the past 30 years, you're going to have a lot of retired boomers that might want to move in together in one big McMansion, but that you can't do that now. So that's just like the Golden Girls. I mean, that's exactly that's where that comes from. Beautiful. Okay, well, let's talk about another topic that you guys are championing, which is we've had a lot of progress on this year, which is school choice. And ultimately, we'd love to see something like a voucher system that's in the state, but we did get some success with the federal school choice initiatives, and the state voted to participate in the big beautiful bill, the portion of it that talks about tax credits going towards a scholarship program, et cetera. But talk to us about just what more can we do? I mean, is that enough? Or are we going to stop there and just hope that system works, or what?
Well, I'll first say that I think I would have preferred the big beautiful bill if it were just this one provision and left out most of the other ones. But I will say that this was a very a positive step on in terms of allowing individuals to take a tax credit for gifts that they make to scholarship granting organizations, either in state or out of state. Frankly, the only decision that Kentucky had to make in this case, which was House Bill 1, which was whether or not to opt into a program to allow Kentucky school kids to benefit from those gifts. Of course, Andy Beshear vetoed that bill. In part, well, perhaps not in part, it would have given him the authority, the bill, or should say the program would have given him the authority to make the determination about whether Kentucky participates. So lawmakers said, well, we're just going to take that authority away from the governor and we're going to give it to the Secretary of State. And so the Secretary of State has decided to opt in to the federal scholarship program, and it will allow Kentucky families and taxpayers rather, to give money to these scholarship granting organizations. Those organizations will then take applications from families in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and that money will follow the child to a school that those families find acceptable for their kids. It's very straightforward. It's fairly similar to some of the policies that have been advanced by the Bluegrass Institute and other groups in the Commonwealth for many years. But as you may know, our Supreme Court has tossed out basically every kind of school choice you can imagine over the last few years. And this is, at the moment, this is the best we can do. But I think what it will do, one, is I think we'll see an exodus from some particularly untrustworthy school systems in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, that is, parents clamoring to get their kids into different schools.
Jefferson County Public Schools.
Yes, and that clamor might not be exclusively to private schools. It might be to other public schools that
Right.
are more that have already earned the trust of a lot of
That's right.
families. But to the extent that students need tutoring, I believe transportation is included as well, that a lot of these scholarships can go to provide supplemental education reform, education services for young people. And I think that's what earned the votes of a couple of Democrats in the House and Senate when this bill originally passed.
Well, because I think there is more that can be done. It's great that we have that option now as a state, and I hope some of these nonprofits are spinning up to accept this scholarship money. What is the process of that happening? What's the timeline of that happening now that's been passed? Are there organizations spinning up to do this now, or what's
there are a lot of schools around the state, both public and private, are imagining and thinking about what steps they need to take.
Yeah.
And we have some helpful information that we're going to be putting out pretty soon. So people should subscribe to our updates at bluegrassinstitute.org so that they can be well apprised of what the next steps are, both for taxpayers and for families and for schools to take advantage of these programs. But right now, the regulations are being written by the Secretary of State's office for how this actually will function within Kentucky.
All right.
A lot of that is complicated by the fact that it's both federal and state agencies that have to interact here to make this happen. But I think schools are hungry for it, and they can't wait to make it very easy to welcome new students into their classrooms. A lot of schools, like where my kids go, they're proud of the work they do. And I know a lot of schools feel that way, both public and private. And it will be wonderful to see parents connect with schools that can truly earn their trust and not schools that they're just stuck sending their kids to.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. So there's two groups of people here that you alluded to that need to be prepared for this. One is just the average taxpayer, just you and me, because the average taxpayer has the ability to now designate a portion of their tax, of their federal income tax, to go towards a scholarship program. So that
I'll say that the details matter.
Okay.
What these individuals will do is they will give a gift out of their income.
Oh, I see.
To these organizations.
Okay.
And they will receive a credit against that gift on their federal income tax.
Got it. Okay. So
it's not, they're not designating a portion of their taxes.
Oh.
What they're doing is giving a gift and receiving a credit for that gift.
Why do you clarify that? Yeah.
This matters as a federal matter because as Anthony Kennedy wrote, the money does not belong to the tax collector until it enters the tax collector's hand. So these are private gifts.
So these organizations, these nonprofit groups that are collecting this money needs to be they need to be promoting themselves to the average person to hey, give to us and we will give you this credit and then so look for a lot of promotion, I guess, marketing from organizations like that too.
It would not surprise me if, and I assume this will be the case, that there will be organizations that represent public schools exclusively, accepting funds to help students move from one school to another. It wouldn't surprise me if the Kentucky Education Association is set up.
I'll guarantee it. Yeah, the teachers unions are going to jump all over this.
Because, I mean, they want to keep as many students in the public school system as possible. And now the opportunity exists for them to accommodate those students those families rather, who want their students to go to other schools.
Yeah, goodness. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now the other group is parents, right? The parents that want to take advantage of this. They need to be looking out for these scholarship organizations that will grant them scholarships.
Well, what I would advise parents to do at this point in the process is talk to the leadership of the schools where you would like to send your kids.
Okay. Right.
Or talk to if you like your school, then you should talk to the leadership there to find out what kind of benefits can flow to your children in terms of supplemental education. That's tutoring or transportation or other benefits that can flow that way. But if you want your kid to go to a private school and you just felt like you haven't quite been able to afford it yet, now is the time, I think, to reach out to the leadership of those schools and say, what can we do to and how will this scholarship program help our kids attend your school?
Good stuff. Well, Caleb, I think this is the last segment we have you, so I want to wish you happy July 4th hope you're celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country's founding in a productive and exciting way. And so thanks for being on the show today. And so Bluegrass Institute, we encourage everybody to go to their website, sign up for their newsletter. They have a lot of just great information about all things, freedom and liberty and free market in this state, and it's just definitely worth following. So Caleb, thanks for being on the program. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about Kentucky's independence or Kentucky's founding in this next segment. We'll be right back. Very good. kyvoice.org. All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I want to thank again Caleb Brown with the Bluegrass Institute for being on the program today. We're going to spend this last segment. I want to kind of highlight Kentucky's history a little bit. We're going into July 4th next week, and if you know anything about the founding of Kentucky, it was probably one of the most dramatic stories in American history, and just the whole story of Daniel Boone and just the how these settlers came across the Appalachians through the Cumberland Gap, and some down the Ohio River too. There's some folks that floated down the Ohio River on flatboats, and how the state was founded, and just the basically in the middle of a war, right? Kentucky was founded during the Revolution, right? And it was a front line in many ways. The British and the Indians, the British or the Native Americans, Indians, whatever you want to call them. I'm not politically correct, so who cares? The Indians allied with the British because they thought their interests would be better served with the British. So the British encouraged the Indians to go and attack all these American settlers that were coming across through the Cumberland Gap, and the warfare was just brutal. I mean, they're literally you wouldn't know this unless you just maybe draw by a little roadside marker, but you'll occasionally see a little roadside marker that site of the so and so massacre, or this is the site of some station, right? Well, when I say a station, I mentioned this yesterday. Stations were little small forts or little fortified compounds that pioneers, when they were going through the state and kind of settling, they would say, okay, we need to settle this little area here. Okay, the first thing we're going to build is we're going to build this little fortified log cabin with gun slits, because the Indians, as soon as they know we're here, they're going to come and try to kill us all. And so let's get this station built. We're going to build this little fort. And so whenever you see the word station on a road, like Tucker Station Road, Valley Station, Lynn Station Road, there's those terms are used all over the state. Just know that there was a fortified settlement there that was built during wartime, right? During wartime. So Kentucky was a front line in that era. And so, and there were many massacres and many battles around those things. So basically, what would happen is the Shawnee Native Americans, it's a tribe that lived in Ohio and Indiana. They would raid across the river, and they didn't necessarily live in this area. They just came over here and they thought it was their ground. They hunted here. Kentucky was this beautiful place for hunting, and if you don't know what Kentucky was like before settlement, picture the bluegrass area. Almost like the Great Plains out west, where you would see just huge herds of buffalo, and the buffalo would travel around the state from Salt Lick to Salt Lick, and that's why you see areas called Lick, like Blue Lick or Big Bone Lick. There's all these little licks in the names of Kentucky. Well, that's because those were places where the buffalo would go, and what they would do, the buffalo would actually go eat the ground. They would take the soil and they would chew it up and spit it out, because what was going on there were springs in the ground that were bringing water up and basically creating like a big muddy area. But those springs were going through salt deposits, and so it would bring up salty, briny water. And so the animals need salt just like we do. So they would travel around from Salt Lick to Salt Lick in this state. And so you'd have basically, so picture this: you're a herd of a couple thousand buffalo, and you're sitting here in Shepherdsville, down here at there was a big salt lick right there in Shepherdsville downtown. So that they would sit there and they would sit there for 2 or 3 weeks, chewing up the ground. Eventually, they would just kind of chew all the salt out of it. It's like, it's done. Okay, we're done. We can't get any more salt out of here. So that the herd would go, okay, we know where the next salt lick is. So they would all take off and start walking down to the next salt lick, and they would go to Blue Lick or wherever they would go. And so those pathways between the licks, picture them being giant highways, because they were literally like 4-lane highways of just trampled mud and rock that the state was crisscrossed with. So when you went into Kentucky as a settler or as a Native American, you walked into a state that already had formed highways, in a sense, from the buffalo, from going from one salt lake to another. So it's a pretty interesting thing to think about. It's like, boom, plop down in this beautiful place. There's fields and there's forest and there's roads. Where do these roads come from? It's the buffalo. So anyway, so part of the wilderness road that Daniel Boone, helped forge and create was the buffalo paths and one of those buffalo paths went up from Harrodsburg all the way over to Shepherdsville, where there was a big salt lick down there, and then up from Shepherdsville up through. If you're listening locally, I'll just explain these roads to you. You'll know these roads. Matter of fact, I might even pull this up. I've got a kind of a map of this online, but there is basically the Wilderness Road goes up from like Shepherdsville, Preston Highway up to Blue Lick Road. Kind of goes up Blue Lick Road, and then connects to Preston, and then goes up from Preston all the way to downtown Louisville. And what's fascinating, there's real fascinating stories of settlers traveling that, and Indian attacks and or places that people would stop, like Okolona. You ever thought of what the term Okolona was about? Well, Okolona is a term that means lone oak, because when the settlers first came through here, basically Preston Highway was Wilderness Road. That's how the settlers came through. There was this giant oak tree, which was right there where the old library was on Preston Highway, that was known as this landmark, because everything around that area was kind of swampy, but you had this one big oak tree. So the settlers would when they were coming through, they would just stop there and camp. And so they called it, we're going to go stop by the lone oak. And so that area became Okolona. And so, then there's a couple of spots there on Preston where there was some, little skirmishes with the Indians and stuff. And there's history of that. And it's just fascinating. Yeah, anyway, I just love the history of this area, the early history of this area. People don't appreciate the drama. And so another character that you should maybe learn about, if you haven't heard about him, is a fellow by the name of George Rogers Clark. And George Rogers Clark was part of the family that Lewis and Clark was from. I think George Rogers Clark was the uncle to Lewis and Clark. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But anyway, study what he did, because during the Revolution, George Rogers Clark basically gathered Kentucky militia, about 100, 200 men, gathered them Corn Island, which is now underwater. It's right there in front of the riverfront there on near kind of Shippingport Island, but it's now underwater. But gather them there and say, okay, we're going to go take on the British. We're tired of these Indians and the British coming down and raiding Kentucky. And matter of fact, all this area north of the Ohio River, it's Indian country, Indian territory. We're going to claim it for the United States. It's going to be, we're going to go take on the British. So he did, and he did it in a heroic way. And so some of the exploits they did, there was I think it was Vincennes, Indiana, where he and all these Kentucky militia went up and attacked this fort, and they did it in the wintertime. And in order to get to this fort, they had to wade through chest deep water and cold water for at least about a mile or two to kind of sneak up on this fort. And then they got the fort, they surrounded it and kicked the British out. And if it wasn't for George Rogers Clark defeating, the small contingent of British regulars that were here to, basically be like the Green Berets of that era to try to rally the Indians to fight the American. So George Rogers Clark basically said, okay, we know where the trouble's coming from. It's these British that are giving supplies to the Indians, that are giving them muskets and flints and powder. And so we're going to go after them. We know where they're at. They're down there at Vincennes. They're down there. And what's interesting, there was actually these little cities along the Ohio River that were founded by the French, of all things. So you had French settlements in that area because the French had been in this area first. So Vincennes is one of them. There's a couple others, I forgot the name of it. But anyway, so he raided these cities and pushed the British out. So we wouldn't have, well, put it this way, if it wasn't for George Rogers Clark, the Ohio River would be the northern border of the United States. All right. Canada would be in Indiana. All right. So that would be British to this day. And George Rogers Clark, because of that campaign that he funded himself out of his own pocket, and because of the risk he took, the health, he basically just ruined his health by doing this. And so he ended up having to retire at Locust Grove here in Kentucky, which is, you should go visit that if you haven't. It's one of the early houses in this area, early farm and plantation, and it's just his family was connected with that family, I believe. Anyway, he basically laid up there for another 10 or 20 years and retired and was sick and trying to get his money back from the U.S. government because he spent all this money basically getting Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, basically the whole Midwest he conquered for the United States on his own dime, never got paid back for it. Health was totally ruined. It ended up dying as a pauper in a sense, but still living in a nice house. But still, you should go to Locust Grove. Locust Grove has the whole story of what he did, and it's a museum there as well as the home. And anyway, that guy is he's as young kids say, he's based. He's the real deal, and he's definitely a hero. So that's why you see a lot of references to George Rogers Clark in this area, because he's from this area and basically won the entire Midwest for the Americans during the Revolution. And so, 250 years ago, this guy, gave his health and his life and his fortune for his country, and should be celebrated as an American hero as much as anybody else. So anyway, so that's a great story. Daniel Boone, we talked about Daniel Boone a little bit yesterday. If you don't know anything about Daniel Boone's story, just crazy stuff. The way he rescued his daughters, and I think there was a great quote from him. He said after he rescued his daughters, they all just sat around and had a good cry. I think that's what he said. It's a really cool moment. But anyway, and a little side note, I'm related to the Boone family, not directly from Daniel Boone, but I think his cousin came through, and I'm a descendant of Boone. Like, and a lot of people in the state are connected, historically to the Boones, because they have a lot of descendants, and it's a kind of a big deal if you're related to Daniel Boone or the family here in the state. So I'm proudly one of those, and so I'm sure many of you listening have some connections to pioneer families that have settled the state, and we should be very proud of that, because the American settlement of this country was a noble thing. The left wants to make it sound like we're a bunch of colonizers and evil people. Just the opposite. I think you've shown me any other culture in the world at that time settling this country and treating the native indigenous populations better than what we did, because we had a very missionary-minded approach to the Native Americans. They, on the other hand, didn't understand civility. The way they fought was like, jihadi terrorist. And so it was just a different mindset, and it was just ripe with conflict. But anyway, great stuff. Out of time today. I'd love to spend more time on that. Read our history, especially a history of this state. It is fascinating. You'll be proud of what we did. And God bless America, and we'll see you next week.